We are.
She didn't want me to do it.
Plug it in.
Yep, we're on.
We working? Well, good evening. We'll get started. We're waiting for our auditor, but I'll get started. I'll be presiding or facilitating this meeting tonight as vice chair. Jenny Storley, who usually does, she's our chair, and she needs to be in Schroeder tonight. There's an important meeting there with Minnesota Power, which is going to involve the county. So we all felt that it was best that she be there. So welcome, and appreciate you coming out on this snowy afternoon, but I guess it all stopped, and I guess the roads are good. This is the Truth in Taxation. I'd like to just give you a little information about that, and I'll just cover the, can you hear me?
No.
Oh.
Turn it up, please.
You just gotta talk right in there.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bring it all the way to your mouth.
Someone's turning it up. Is that better?
Yep.
Are we okay? All right.
We have lots of seats up front, too.
Okay, so I'll repeat. Welcome, if you didn't hear me, and Jenny Storley, our board chair, is not here tonight, so you have to put up with me, but appreciate you coming out. We're here to listen to you. The format for this evening will be, I'll make a few comments to start off, and then we'll hear from Auditor Powers about some of the budget information that's on sheets that hopefully all of you got in the audience. And then we'll have a public comment period in which you'll come up and state your name, sign in, and I think we'll try to stick to about 5 minutes, and then I'll give you a warning to summarize if you can. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to it, but I'd like to just share with you what Truth in Taxation is in the state, and so I'll read some information to you that gives a pretty good summary of what the law is. It's a law and a statute that was passed and the reasons for it. Truth in Taxation, which I'll refer to as TNT, is a process first enacted by the legislature in 1988 to enhance public participation in Minnesota's property tax system. The TNT process consists of these three components. The first one, each local government is required to formally adopt a proposed levy in September for the upcoming year. The final levy, when ultimately adopted, may not exceed the proposed levy. There's an exception to that. That's when there's some referendum elections. The second one, county auditors generate parcel-specific notices of proposed taxes for all parcels of property based upon proposed levies, and hopefully you received that within the last couple of weeks. The third one, each local government is required to hold a public meeting tonight after the notices come out where budget and tax issues are discussed and where public testimony must be allowed prior to adopting the county's final levy. Now, the rationale for the program is prior to TNT, the only involvement most taxpayers had with the property tax system was on the valuation side of the equation. Taxpayers received a market value notice in the spring of the year prior to the tax year, but nothing about how that valuation would actually relate to property taxes. Taxpayers could choose to become involved in tax and budgeting decisions by attending meetings of county commissioners, city council, school boards, but few. Remember that tonight we're going to be talking about the county budget, not the school district or the hospital or some of the special assessment districts, as well as the city. The TNT was enacted with a goal of improving accountability by focusing taxpayers on the relationship between budget decisions and property taxes. and providing taxpayers with a greater opportunity to become involved in the local government budgeting process. So thank you for your part in showing up tonight. There are some recent changes in the law that were made in 2009, and some of them, I think they were just done because some of the regulations were quite onerous, especially in responsibility, and found it just was not manageable. And they related to the notice of not having any other meetings at the time. And there was also a law that the final levy needed to be, the original law, the original one said that we needed to adopt a levy at this meeting after we heard you all. And we'll be looking at this at our next board meeting, if all goes well. And we have announced that. So with that, I would just like to give you a little summary about why we got to where we're at and some of the processes that went involved in this. Some time ago, we sent out to the public, it was in the paper, a message from Brady Powers, and I would just like to skip over that publication a little bit. We do have a budget advisory committee that starts meeting typically in the spring. We publish a budget calendar and process for which we started. The county board listens to various departments and so forth, but the budget advisory committee meets at least monthly, and I think this year we met twice a month to go over some of the issues, and we want feedback from that group. And they were formed 2 years ago, and we honor their input and try to discuss issues that we get a better idea of what the public is. And we would hope that you would also talk to the county commissioners, us, about those, and I know many of you have talked to me, at least others in the community have as well, about concerns. But I'd just like to give you a brief summary of where we're at. The Budget Advisory Committee is composed of 4 people. We are not represented in one district because we couldn't find someone. But we have discussions, and we finally got to our final meeting of the year after we listened to the various departments and talked about the pros and cons. Now, there's a couple of contingencies this year that make it a little bit more complicated, and that was the Thigh-Blotnick, and I think, has everyone heard about that? Okay, wow. Okay, so I'm going to have a long introduction. I'll try not to go that way, but I believe you're not going to cover that in your presentation?
It's part of it, but not in great detail.
Okay. Another one that is a contingency and sort of throws a little bit of uncertainty toward us is this whole process as we go forward with vacation rentals. If they go to a commercial, then we have the Fiscal Disparities Act, which is in our area is the Taconite Disparities Act. And so when these have been in seasonal property and all of that funding, typically most of it would come to the county. When it goes commercial, about 40% of that goes to disparities with the fiscal areas of the Iron Range and so forth. It's called the Taconite Disparities Act. So then we would, in the future, if this becomes, enacted, and there's discussions right now with the Department of Revenue, but it looks like this is going forward. If you listen, I listened to a presentation by Senator Bach, and there could be some changes, but I think going forward, we're going to be facing that in our upcoming budget decisions. So we're going to look at possibly some less revenue if that takes place because of the Fiscal Disparities Act. We'll be going to those counties in our area, the northeast area, that don't have income, a lot of income from their commercial base. And we do have some significant income, at least more than some of the others. So the Thigh-Blotnick is a law that was passed, I believe, many, many years ago, right after the Boundary Waters Act was signed in the late 70s. And that allocated certain fundings to counties, 3 counties that have the Boundary Waters in their boundaries, and that is St. Louis County, Cook County, and Lake County. We receive about $750,000 less if the new assessment process goes through. Every 10 years, this is assessed. And in the past, we've had real estate value as the primary determiner of our valuation. This year they did it, and they switched it to timber, which will have less assessed valuation. Our county assessor's been very involved in that, Bob Thompson, as well as other assessors. And there's a group of us that, the three counties we've been meeting. We've met with the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, Semsky, this past summer to make our case. We also had a rebuttal to the assessment that's been submitted, and all of these have been going to the Department of Agriculture. As I mentioned at our last meeting, that this is not a U.S. Forest Service issue, it's a Department of Agriculture, which funds the United States Forest Service budget. And so we're at this right now, the mercy, I think, of the Department of Agriculture. They have the authority to either accept this changed evaluation and the amount that would be provided to the three counties, or they could stick with what was in the past or actually determine something else. Representative Stauber has been involved. We have a lobbyist involved representing our three counties, and they have been meeting. We have a county commissioner, Rich Sway, who is also becoming our Minnesota Association of Minnesota Counties president, very involved in this process, and he knows how to work with various groups. So we made a concerted effort. We meet quarterly at least to discuss these issues, and we had a meeting on Monday in Duluth, and we anticipate that we might hear within the next couple of weeks. But so, what does that mean for Cook County? It could be $750,000 less in revenue. This is for a 10-year period of time. That's $7.5 million. So we as commissioners really have to look at that. And right now, I think the three commissioners met on Monday that are involved in this, and we're going to proceed as it's going to be staying the way it is right now unless we hear differently. And we're hopeful that something will change, and maybe by the time we have a board meeting. But this whole possibility has got big implications for us when you look at the levy and the size of it and this impact. So that's 7.5% when you look at a levy for that $750,000. So how do we do that? How do we work with that? And definitely when it is finalized, we'll have to do some long-range planning and look at how we approach that. So just wanted to throw that in, that we have spent quite a bit of time. So back to the Budget Advisory Committee. There was a consensus at that time at our last meeting. At least a majority of them felt that we should go with the 6.05 levy increase as the preliminary levy and contingent to change, especially if we heard more positive results in regards to the Thai-Botnick, that we could definitely come down. So that's where we ended up. That was recommendation. There was one dissenter on the Budget Committee that didn't want any levy increase at all, and we respected that. And but that's what we brought forward to the board. Throughout this process, early on, the Budget Advisory Committee and I communicated it at a county board meeting that our department should try to hold the line as much as possible. We have increased costs, and we have cost of living raises that are built into our contracts, and increased costs, that's just maintaining the status quo. So there was very few exceptions. We've tried to hold things as tight as possible, but there's always some things that can come up. But here again, the tentative nature of our revenue sources for this next year, as well as going forward, are going to be a dynamic where we would definitely want your input. And so maybe we'll be having a meeting, something like this, and more of an informative thing as we go through the budgeting process next year. Now, the reason that this is at this place and time, we're very close to the end, is because that's what the law states, that we should have a preliminary levy and have a truth in taxation meeting set, and it's usually in December, so. But we appreciate your input all throughout that whole process. So, I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Powers, our auditor, to give some information to you, and then we'll get into the public comment period.
So you should have copies in front of you. Our computer's doing updates right now, so we can't use that. So paper copies. So some of it is a repeat of what Commissioner Bersheim said. It's statutory. This has to happen each year. Public meeting, public time to speak. It's at this time of year, late November to the end of December is when it's required to happen. The notice that goes out shows the county levy, but it has to show all the levy authorities, including school, hospital, city, towns, EDA, ARDC, and the state of Minnesota, which levies the tax on us also. There's some disadvantages of property taxes. Some of you are well aware of the complexity of it, hard to understand. Unfunded mandates, state and federal. Taxes may not match the ability to pay, as some of you are aware. There are some advantages. It's more responsive and accountable to the public. That's why we're all here in the same room. And more stable for local government functioning than income or sales tax. Note the meetings in the spring of each year, as Myron said, for values and classifications called the Board of Review meetings. You get a statement on that when you get the tax statement. There's a yellow card in there that tells you about those meetings, and those always happen before the property tax meetings because of the time lag in inputting valuations. So next spring it will be for the 2021 taxes, so please pay close attention to that and start asking questions then. The next page is just some hints on that proposed property tax statement that you get. Up on the top, just that people should look at those things at their values. The estimated market value, did it change? And in that same box down below, did your property class change? In this one, the value only changed $1,000. The class is still a resident homestead. Down below that, homestead should be receiving a taconite credit. Make sure that's there. Below that, you see a block there for county tax. The statements are confusing because all the information for the meeting is there, the address and the time of the meeting, but the dollar amounts there is the county tax, how it's changed from 2019 to proposed 2020. One thing to know, you may have a neighbor close to you, same value, and you're saying, why is this different? Because he may be in a different fire district. If in an organized area, you may be in Maple Hill, and you may be in Colville, and there's a little different tax for that, and that shows up, this is mandated format, it shows up on that county line. So sometimes it can be slightly different. The next box is where towns or cities would appear unorganized. You would expect your fire levy to appear there, but it doesn't. It appears in the county line. The next block is the state general tax. That only appears for seasonal and commercial properties. There may be some other small ones, but that's generally it. So nothing here because it's homestead. The next block is school, and the school has more than two types of taxes, but this mandated form breaks it out into voter approved and other. So voter approved, some of that is referendums that only homestead that's seasonal does not pay, and some voter approved everyone pays. Down below that, the special taxing districts, that's where you find the hospital, the EDA, there's a small one called ARDC. We used to have a sewer district, that appeared there also. Right at the bottom, if you're subject to any special assessments, they don't show up on this statement. Too complicated. And in this case, you see this homestead that had no change in class, no change in valuation, had a decrease of 4.8% in the proposed tax. And that's because of the increase in the valuation overall in the county. You'll see more of that later. So the next page is all levies history. This is all of those levying authorities, including the county. Just gives you a little bit of a history on it. the city, the towns, ARDC, school, fire districts. The sewer is on there because it was there in 2001. The EDA, the hospital, and then you see the county levy, and you see the total local levies, and below that, the state general tax, that goes directly to the state of Minnesota. Fiscal disparities, we send that to the fiscal disparity administrator in St. Louis County. Most of that goes to St. Louis County. And then down below, the county percent of all levies. This year, 2020 proposed $10 million of county levy, $18 million in total monies levied, so about 58% of it is county levy. I put on here 2001, that was kind of a marker for my time here when there was a big change in school levies across the state. At that time, that's the first column on the left. You see the school had a $3 million levy, the county had a $3.3 million levy, so really a big chunk of the school levy was local levy. They changed that. They reduced the school levy. It went down to $200,000 the next year. And then they started collecting the state general tax instead from those two different types of properties. And if you see on the bottom, that is reduced over the years. So long story there, but we won't go into that now. Next page. Reduced impact to homesteads this year because of valuation change, because of shifting in classification. So our $10,382,000 proposed levy, 6.05 increase from 2019. The overall increase in value was 7.2%. And for a homestead with about $200,000 value with no change, about $18 reduction in general. Down below, as Myron said, this is we're calling that the budget driver this year, that proposed reduction in Ty Blatnick. We've been getting about $1.88 million. They're proposing to reduce that by $751,000. That would be for at least 10 years because before the next assessment, so that'd be $7.5 million over 10 years if that stands. The next page just shows in chart form what's happening. It shows 2019, 2020, the valuation or the net tax capacity, which is what tax is based on, went from $16,170,000 up to $17,335,000, which is a 7.21% increase. The levy went from 9.7 to 10.3 million, a 6.05% increase, but the tax rate went down because the value went up more than the levy went up. And just shown below that for homestead properties of any valuation, 100, 150, 247, or 413, just the county levy alone under that scenario is a reduction of about 1.1%. The next page is just a summary of the county's proposed budget and levy. So on the left you see the various funds, the general fund, the highway, human services, airport, the building fund, capital bonds, and then a couple of bondings where we have no levy. Sales tax bonds are paid for by sales tax, not by property tax. And the equipment bonds there, we've already saved up the money. We're just going to make a payment in February, and those are done. And then new this year is something called capital reserve. The board wanted to capture some of the bonding reduction and start building up funds for replacing roofs, big projects, too small to bond for, use cash, or build up enough cash to have a smaller bond issue, let's say in 5 or 10 years. If there was something to bond and build, you could use the cash to offset some of that. Over on the far right-hand side, you can see the increase in these various funds from 19 to 20. In the general fund, it's an increase of 12.21%. A big chunk of that is the reduction in the Ty Blatnick payment. It's not all of it. The department increases, as Myron said. but that's a big chunk of it. The highway and public health, good news on both of those. Highway, 1.14% increase. Human services, 0.74% increase. The public health, I don't go to the meetings, but everything that I've gathered is that the increases that they've had the last couple of years in personnel, they get reimbursed from federal government. They've been strategic about who they've added, and they're getting reimbursements to largely cover those increases of personnel in the last couple of years. Good news, the building fund, the airport hasn't gone up 1.48%. The building fund, this is proposed, obviously, but there are some large expenditures that Brian and the rest of us saw coming on the horizon. For example, the camera system over at Law Enforcement Center is, I know it's 10, 12, I'm not sure how old it is, but it's past its age, and so they're going to have to replace that. That's somewhere in the 80,000 plus alone. The new capital bonds, it's a reduced payment, so that's 125,000. I talked about sales tax equipment, and then that new capital reserve was an addition. So all of that totals the new 10.3 proposed. The next page is just a real abbreviated snapshot comparison over a long period of time. I just started keeping track of these numbers in 1989, so that's the marker. We could go back further. So just looking at budgeted expenses, revenues, levy, and the fund balance from 1989. And I picked 2018 because that's the last time we have an unreserved fund balance that's certified in our audit. We could guess at what it is now, but that was certified. So over that time period, you've got the expenditures have gone up a little over 3 times, 314%. The revenues have gone up a little over 3 times, 3.23, 323%. The levy has gone up over 3 times, 338%. And the fund balance has gone up over 3 times, 3.73%. That's the one that's the toughest to get a handle on year to year, because some changes a few years ago. We're now required to include the valuation of all of our investments as of 12/31 of each year, and that varies sometimes tremendously in some years, and it's something that then changes year to year. It's one of those requirements. We would not use that other than it's required, because we're not going to sell our investments on all of them on December 31st. It just tells you what would happen in a crisis, so to speak. The bonding people, I think, have required that. The last page just gives you in chart form what changed in the classification and the valuation, and what the 2 classes were: seasonal rec residential and non-homestead residential. And the assessor's office had to change some of these based on the usage, and seasonal rec is a 1% class rate, and the non-homestead is a 1.25%. It doesn't sound like much, but it's 25% higher. So that shift in the number of properties, you can see the numbers. So the first 2 columns are count. Those are the number of parcels. So the number of parcels that switched from seasonal rec to non-homestead residential, you can see it's over 1,000. And then the total property tax paid by those 2 classes changed dramatically also. Seasonal rec, instead of paying 48% of the total property tax, is now paying 35%. Non-homestead residential is paying 24% in 2020 rather than 10% last year. And that is all I have for presentation.
Okay, thank you, Brady. So we'll go on to the public comment period, and you'll sign in, so we have a record, and give your name. And we're going to try to stick with 5 minutes. I would just like to make a few comments about this process. We're here to listen to you, And I think you're here to express your concerns and, quite frankly, maybe persuade us. You have that opportunity. I think we're trying to understand you, and so at least I know I can promise you that I'm going to do that, and I think the rest of us will too. So it's very helpful to understand someone if you don't get attacked or make personal comments or cheer or clap or whatever. We're human beings. It can build up a little defensive stuff. And so please be respectful. We're working on that as a board about civility, and we want to learn from you, and, you know, that's why we're here. And we want it to be constructive so that we all benefit. And we will give our reflections and comments after all of your comments, and so we're not going to interact with you during this public comment period. But I'm sure the commissioners or myself will keep notes, and if we want to comment on something, hopefully it's not to argue. We're here to understand, and we may not agree on things, but I think respect goes both ways, so we're going to try to practice that ourselves. So with that, I think we'll go with 5 minutes, and when you've had your 5 minutes, I will be informed that, and I will let you know that you need to summarize as soon as possible. And we're not going to trade off times or do anything like that. This is going to be somewhat organized. At least we're going to attempt to do that so that we can better understand each other. So with that, who would like to come up? Just raise your hand, I guess, and I'll recognize you to come forward.
Is there any questions we can ask first, like ask Kimber about the hospital?
No, I think what we've decided to do is that we're going to make this a public comment, and then we can comment afterwards. Now, if you want to express some questions and so forth, then I think we as commissioner, it's going to be you in the audience and us as staff and commissioners, but we're not responsible.
One comment, if you could speak into the microphone.
I'm sorry.
That would really help. We can hear you.
Should I start over?
Yeah.
No.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. I'll hold it. So please come up, and if you'd like to come up, please state your name, write your name down on a piece of paper, and we'll be listening.
Hey, can you hear me in the back? We good? All right, hi, my name is Colton Thompson. I'm just coming here today as a future property holder, taxpayer, member of this community. And I just have some concerns because I crunched the numbers a couple days ago. And with the properties that I'm going to own in the future, after, you know, time goes on, I'm going to end up having to pay like $15,000 just to keep these pieces of property that my family worked hard for and strive for and, you know, kept up for the years. And I really don't want to, you know, let that go. I don't want to move out of here, but at the rate this is all going, I'm going to be forced to. I'll have no choice. Your sons, your daughters, we're going to be forced out of here with no chance, no hope, no choice, really. And it really saddens me, and disgruntles me, and quite frankly, I'm embarrassed. I'm not here to point fingers. We can all agree that this is a major issue. We have some things that recently came up that we didn't know about before that need to be addressed. But, you know, it has to be fixed, and you guys are really the only ones that can do it for us. Again, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not trying to pick sides. I'm just saying, like, this is a major issue, and we need to do something to fix it. You know, we're all educated. We all do, you know, our homework, our facts. We like to know what we're talking about, but this is a huge issue, and it needs to stop being pushed aside. We need to figure out what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to come up next? Yes. Please sign in.
Yep.
Oops.
Yeah, hi, my question is,
who determines whether you're seasonal, recreational, residential, or non-homestead residential on your tax bill? And how is that determined? Okay.
Okay, we'll address that.
Could you state your name?
Mike Thunborg, I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll write that down and we'll
Okay.
get to it.
Because that's difference of 48,000, or 48% to 10%. And my bill went up 49%, so I'm just wondering how I'm determined to be seasonal, rec residential. What does the rec mean?
Okay, I think that's a good question. Maybe
Yeah.
we could change that. So could you address that, or?
Yeah, so the difference between seasonal recreational has always been like someone's cabin, someone's second property, whether they live down in the cities or whether you live in Grand Marais and have a cabin at the Gunflint Trail, that's common. Seasonal recreational has a non-commercial clause that it can't be income producing, so chances are you got changed because it's a rental property.
Nope.
Okay.
I live in the Twin Cities, but we've had this property for 14 years. It's right on First Avenue in downtown. Not downtown, but just across 61. And we come up every week or so, whenever we can, and stay for a week, you know.
Well,
So it's not a cabin, and it's not a rental. We've never rented it out.
yeah, well, and also being in the city and not a seasonal property, it could be considered just like a second property. If you spend 6 months here, 6 months there, it could also go to a residential non-homestead. It kind of depends on the property.
Well, I think it should be a non-homestead residential instead of the seasonal. It's not a cabin, it's a house.
So what is it classified right now?
It just says seasonal, but mine is a 49% increase.
Well, that must be due to valuation. If the class didn't change, then you had a value change.
Oh, yeah, it went up big time in value.
Right, and I've answered a lot of questions over the last year, since April, when we sent out the new value notices for 2019. We did our review of Grand Marais for 2019, and I mean, it was significantly underassessed. The values were significantly lower than what they truly are. I have a sales study done. During the appeals process, if you'd have come in, what we do is we provide similar sales. We look at similar properties to yours and we provide comparable sales. And if there's still questions of the valuation, we'll review it, we might lower it. But that does happen in the springtime, like Commissioner Bershine said, that's the time to look at your valuation.
Okay. Mine's,
We still will take a look at it, that's why I'm here today,
Yeah.
to take names
Okay.
and, if something's not right, we can correct it.
because this says seasonal, and it says seasonal last year. Now, does
So it's
that,
seasonal this year and last year.
yeah. Now, does that mean it's seasonal rec or seasonal
Now,
non-homestead?
you did hear the commissioner say that residential has a 25% higher tax rate, right?
Yeah, this
Mr.
is-
Chair, point
this
of
is-
order. We're here to listen to the public talk
Sure.
about the levy. I'm really sorry,
Yeah,
I know
I-
you have questions,
Yeah, yeah.
but those are for him and his office, and we have a lot of people here, I think, that want to.
Okay. Nobody was
Talk.
getting up, so.
So I've got your name, if you
Yeah.
That's a good point. I think if you have questions of the valuation, I neglected to mention in the beginning that should be addressed to the assessor, and give your name to him, and you could do that after this meeting and so forth, because we could spend a lot of time on that, and we're here to hear your concerns about the tax generally and how it affects the county. And definitely you have individual concerns, but we can't respond to that as commissioners. The assessor needs to, so thank you, Commissioner Dukirk. And I think what we'll do is whenever we have these question-type issues, I guess as chair, I'll have to just call it, and whether that's something that goes to the assessor or something that can be done and dealt with better individually, so I'll take that prerogative. Okay, thank you. Who would like to be next? Lloyd? You sign in, please.
Yeah, I was going to comment on 2020 proposed 6% levy and why I feel it should be zero, but after I listened to the board meeting on Tuesday and I heard the chair say that earlier this week, that at the beginning of Tuesday's board meeting, the chair suggested the best way to determine what a community wants is to listen. And I just heard you say it a little bit ago, you really want to listen. And she then proceeded to make the statement that this board tries to do a really good job of this. Well, I'm here to speak about 12 examples of where I would suggest this board has failed to listen. And I will start reading them off. If you were listening, why did this board not address people's concerns regarding the former county administrator and his ill-advised spending and unhealthy pattern of withholding important information when it came to doling out taxpayer dollars? If you were listening, why did this board ignore the expressed concerns of county staff and in doing so allow a culture of mistrust to develop to the point that good employees no longer wanted to come to work? If you were listening, why did this board allow the former county administrator and our county attorney to make citizens jump through hoops in order to find out what's happening behind closed doors? If you were listening, why did you vote to financially hamstring taxpayers with a 25-year YMCA contract that provides little oversight and basically zero accountability? And this is one area that's going to have to be addressed in the future, especially now since you're not going to get that $750,000 extra money. Nobody ever seems to really know the actual figures on it. And if you were listening, why do you continue to shell out the limited tax dollars we have in this county to hire consultants to do your research and basically make your decisions for you? If you were listening, why did you vote to approve double-digit levies, setting a record for the highest combined 3-year taxpayer levy increase in the 146 history of our county? If you were listening, why do you continue to hire more staff when other counties seek ways to reduce staff through efficiencies and attrition? In other words, somebody quits. Have you ever talked to the heads of department and actually said, is there another department that could help out? Or is there another person that could pick up the workload? Things like that. How many times have you, county commissioners, ever went in and talked to the heads of departments and found out where the waste is? The idea is to find out the waste, so instead of raising a budget every year, $500,000 to $700,000, and we all know it's going to have to stop someday, you know. So, let me see. If you were listening, why did you criticize those that suggest we hold government agencies accountable for their financial promises when it comes to payments in lieu of taxes? And now that the county is facing a $750,000 shortfall, all of a sudden you see yourselves as victims. If you were listening, why do you continue to help nonprofits buy up business properties that get taken off the tax roll? If you were listening, is it unthinkable to believe that you would have the gall to even think about giving yourselves a pay raise? Usually you give yourself a pay raise if you feel you have helped the taxpayers out. If you keep increasing their taxes and the levies keep going up, well then when I look at it, you know, in some cases I'm sure there's heads of departments that can't cut anymore. But until you actually dig into the fine numbers and fine line item things, you're not going to find out where you can save money. Given what we've witnessed over the past 4 years, how many citizens really believe they've been listened to? Fact is, I don't know how you think you are listening to, but certainly isn't the hardworking taxpayers who made a big mistake by voting you all into office if you don't listen? Let's just say we've got buyer's remorse, big time. And unless you rein in the reckless spending, you will continue to see good people move out of our community. It's no different than the jail that was going to go through last year. The citizens of Cook County should not have to form a group to try to prove to the county board and an administrator of a salary of $119,500 that it was a fallacy. We didn't need it. The sheriff admitted to it. That should be your people's job. And I mean, you got to earn your wages, and with all the benefits you get and everything else. And it isn't very hard. You gotta run this like you would your own checkbook. You gotta figure out ways to try to cut back. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Okay, who would like to come up next? Yes.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for having this
Yeah.
meeting. I've never been in a meeting like
Your
this.
name,
so
please?
I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do, but.
Could we
I
get your
just have
name,
a
please?
couple- Oh, Darlene Brutager.
Thank you, Darlene.
I just have a couple questions maybe, so I don't know if you can answer them or not. We own one of those properties in Tofty that is a vacation rental. And I understand that we're going to be getting some kind of a license or something that we're going to have to buy every year for a little while. I don't know what that license is going to provide for us, because we do have to have a state license, and we, buy that every year, and okay,
Need to talk to that guy.
Okay.
yeah.
yeah.
So
He's not the
could-
licensing department, it's
No,
planning and zoning.
excuse me, thank you. Planning and zoning would be the one to talk to about the licensing.
So
Yeah.
they'll tell us what they're
They're
gonna.
sending a letter out shortly.
Okay, okay. So that was one thing. And then I did notice that our classification changed from seasonal to resident non-homestead. And there was a 26% increase in the value of the property, which, again, I understand that. But our taxes went up 41.3%. So I don't understand where the 41.3% comes from.
Okay, and you
It's
need,
a change in class plus the increased value, so, you can challenge both of those. I'm here to take names, and I think you guys may have already called my office. No? Okay. I've had a lot of calls.
Okay.
but-
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
I've got your name here, so if you want, you can give me your number, and then I can.
okay. Thank you,
thank you.
thank you.
Next. Going once?
Hi there, I'm Brad Thompson. I live in Grand Marais, or just on the edge, first property in the county. The whole budget continues to rise and continues going up and up. I don't have the numbers, I don't have the time to get involved. If I did, I'd become a commissioner. We should be striving for a zero or a drop in the budget. I spent Thanksgiving weekend in St. Cloud, and they're plowing St. Cloud with a 45-year-old grader, and when they got done, the snow was gone. We don't need new graders and new equipment and new buildings. Yes, we got to keep the roof up and maintain things, but we don't need extravagant stuff. If you can't afford a new Cadillac at home, you drive your old rusty Chevrolet. I think it was Lloyd that said, run the county like you run your own checkbook. I don't know if I have the answers. I know it's getting tougher and tougher all the time to make a living around here, and, well, probably anywhere, but guess I have no more than, please work on it.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, someone else? I'm going to go to 3, okay.
Todd Sylvester, 206 North Broadway. I'm kind of a mixed bag here. I can appreciate that you have done some work to try to bring the levy down compared to the double numbers we have had. And I realize I'm kind of an extreme case because my medical. And when I sell this house, I will be okay. But in the meantime, you guys are killing me. And I'll give you a prime example. When you're disabled, the money just doesn't go. I used to get up in the morning and go to work, and I never came to these. I never complained. I just paid my taxes. And when I got disabled and I'm listening to everybody at these meetings and I'm going, now I'm living the nightmare, okay? The money doesn't make it. I had to go and get a loan to pay my back taxes after my 10 surgeries I went through, so that my house is not taken for tax foreclosure this year. And that will come out when my house sells. But that's what people in my shape are going through. You guys are community building, and you need to build a community for everybody, not just the people who can afford the extras and the frills. That's picking and choosing and discrimination, and it's just not right. He mentioned that they went through Grand Marais and reassessed because things are way down in value. And my house is for sale. He had estimated my remodel would be $399. The realtors say, he's out there, okay? And he says they aren't in tune with the new prices. Did the new prices show up when the people from Twin Cities got hired here? I put my house on for $360,000, $39,000 below the supposed value of my remodel.
Do you have your tax
No,
valuation?
no, but I'm just saying.
But it's 280.
And I'll tell that, I'll give you a prime example anyway. I can't get what he said my house would be worth, and I never thought it would be worth that much anyway, because even if you put shingles on, your house is supposed to have shingles. Even if you replace your windows along the line because they leak, that's normal maintenance. Because I sided my house, people have to side their house. Because I put new sheetrock up, my sheetrock's no better than anybody else's.
Excuse me, Todd, could you resolve these with him, or?
No,
So-
I
no.
heard that he has the property listed
So
for
please, okay.
260, and his value's at 280, so I'm wondering what the question is. I've never valued your house at 390.
I said you're estimated. You came through, you took pictures, and you estimated my value at the remodel would be
Your
$399.
house is valued at 280,000.
I understand that. But a prime example of what I'm trying to bring up, and I'll take Petey Greshik's old house 2 blocks up. His house was assessed at approximately $429, $430, whatever. It did drop after he complained and after it was on the market. But he got $100,000 less than that. And he paid taxes for a long time because he was overassessed, he paid over taxes. I can take a number of people. My old neighbor, when he went up to $399, he said, I wish, if somebody would give me $399, I would have to sell it. And so I think that the re-evaluations across the board are a little off. But that's another story. And mine will get assessed or figured out when it's sold. And I agree with Lloyd. Your policies are pricing people out. And I don't know if you just want rich people here or, Mike Roth is fast to say, we want people who can afford to pay our tax increases. Are you picking and choosing who you want here? And You know, and I think Jim Boyd, when he represented higher ed, he came to the commissioners and he said, don't put your eggs in all in one basket being tourism, because you cannot build a sustainable community doing that. I think we're about here, because the high taxes, the high cost of living, look around. The tourism jobs, they don't have workers because people can't afford to live here. And that's the way it is. And every time you bring taxes
Jim,
up.
could you summarize,
Yep.
please?
Every time you bring taxes up, you're making it harder for the people, the workers, and the senior citizens and the needy. And they're the people you really want around to fill your jobs, and many times.
Thank you, Todd.
for your time. And once again, I appreciate you guys trying to bring it down.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Going to go to 3, going once, going twice. Last chance to come up. Okay, thank you so much for coming up and expressing your concerns. And some of the questions, I don't know if I can answer because sometimes they're opinions, but I think we'll try to stick to the facts. We as county commissioners are not responsible for doing evaluations, assessments and so forth. That's pretty much done to standards set by the Department of Revenue. And so there's procedures that are done as a profession there. But we're certainly aware of it. And so I could comment on that one a little bit, but I'd rather have someone else start. But if no one else wants to start, I'll have my reflection or comment. I'm sorry, question?
Actually, I missed something. I didn't spend my 5 minutes, so if I could have one more second.
One more second? No, you can get 15 seconds.
Brad Thompson again. Recently, I became aware of the physical disparities on our commercial properties, and from all of my research, it seems like it's been going on since 1995. We've been throwing out in the neighborhood of $750,000, $800,000 a year leaves this county, and we do not see any of that back. We've not seen anything positive here. From what I understand, the county has approached the state to try and get out of this, to try and change this policy. I would be happy to call other counties and people to try and change this. It's kind of crazy. I don't see where we're so healthy and wealthy that we should be throwing out almost $1 million every year. We surely could use that in the county, and I don't know where to go with it.
Talk to your legislator, and definitely, it's a state statute.
Yep.
And that would be the best place to go, and we do it. I know I was at a meeting just about a month ago and expressed a concern about the switch and, with our vacation rentals, but, we can work to change things, but we have to abide by the statute.
Yep.
And that's the tough part, it's just we follow that. Brady, anything else?
No, I can't really answer. Just on some of the numbers, it started in 1995. I mean, that's the base year, but we didn't actually start paying, I think, till 98 or 99. And it started in the single or double digits, not even 100, 50, 60. And it's gone up since then. It's just hit the 800s in the last couple of years, 7, 6. So it's kind of a ladder. And when you talk to our legislators, they've spoken about that here more than once and told us that in their minds, they link it to taconite. And we're in a taconite district, and this is a taconite fiscal disparities, and that's the way the legislature sees it. And we gain more by taconite than we lose in fiscal disparities. So that's the way it's been described back to us. It is true, as a county, we get more.
Is that the taconite credits, or
There's more to it? There's more to it. The taconite credits on your tax statement. There's also production tax. We get about $300,000 a year that's in the general fund, just offset levy. Schroeder gets $50,000, $60,000, which is why their levy is so low. The biggest part in the last 20 years is the school remodel. IIIB paid 3/4 of that bond payment. So the school is getting, I don't know the numbers this year. I don't remember, Kimber might remember, but
Okay,
they get the largest chunk for that last 20 years, and then various grants. Some, whether you like the project or not, the golf course has gotten several, the YMCA got one, and the airport has gotten IRRB grants and things like that. But
I think $1 million went through the EDA one year in IRRB grants.
okay. I do feel a little bit better about the fiscal disparities now with that being heard, that we do get something back.
Also, the way they calculate it is how much we charge in taxes, and please don't shoot me, but the legislators have said we can raise our taxes, and then that number will go down.
Okay.
I love that answer, but
Good question, Brad.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any of the commissioners want to start with reflections or try to comment on any of the questions?
the valuations, just before I started, the state came in because we were not meeting a quintile, which is every 5 years. We have to assess the properties, and so we weren't really given a choice. At that point, Bob, you weren't here, but I know you've heard the conversations. The state was going to come in and take over assessing properties for us. So we were able, by meeting the quintile and doing the assessments within 5 years, we were able to keep the assessments done here locally.
And just to add to that, I believe Cook County has had a state reassessment done twice, and they're the only county in the entire state to have that happen. And they bill you for it, probably $750,000.
And then there was a question about, do you ask about reducing staff? We do. We have a personnel committee, so every time an employee retires or resigns or leaves, their job description goes through the personnel committee, and the personnel committee reviews whether or not the description is accurate, and if it's still needed, and if it's suited, or if the job could be absorbed by someone else, and department heads are involved in those conversations. And also the union is involved in, each union has a representative on the personnel committee involved in those conversations. So every time an employee leaves, we do take a look at their job descriptions. And we look at them periodically outside of that also.
Anything else, Commissioner Duker?
I was just trying to answer the questions I knew.
Okay.
You know the YMC stuff.
Okay, I could, but don't lay it all on me. All right, Bobby, Robert, you got anything?
I thank everybody for coming tonight, and this is my third round in this budget thing, and I've been an advocate for the taxpayer pretty much by myself up here since I got elected. You know, I voted no against the levy 2 times, trying to get it down for the, I know I got family, we all got family that feels it, and this year I proposed 475 levy, and I got a second for discussion, and that's as far as it went. You know, I'll probably support this 6% because we're putting $200,000 in there for our building fund. We do have a lot of buildings that need a lot of work in this county, our town halls, our jail, you know, and it's difficult for me to do that, but I think I will. And I always talk to people up on the east end. You know, everybody knows where I'm from. I live on the reservation, and I'm the only commissioner that doesn't pay taxes, that fights for the taxpayer, and that's pretty sad. And that's all I got for you.
Thank you, Robert. I'm sorry, but we closed public comment.
Well, I was just going to ask Bobby a question. All right.
Bobby, are you okay with that?
Huh?
I'll talk to you after.
Okay, you can talk to us afterwards. Yep. Very good. Dave?
I don't have anything really prepared to say, but thank you for coming. I hear you. I also feel the tax increase. I moved out of town, still own property in town, so having the assessed value updated in town, I took a significant hit there, as well as losing my my homestead ability in town, so poor me there, but I understand what you're saying, and I'm pretty proud of our staff for working on these, trying to toe the line on some of these numbers. 1%, 1.7, 0.7, it's admirable, I think. And I'm especially proud on just previous boards, those nasty double-digit increases, I feel, led to a more sustainable situation where our public health and human services can have a 0.7% increase. That happened because of these staff increases previous years. So, yeah, the only thing, the Ty Blatnick puts us in a really tough spot. I'm disappointed that that money, when we started receiving it, was used for operational costs. That would have been an excellent way to start putting money away for capital improvements and taking care of our buildings, like Commissioner DeShaw mentioned, that we really need that to happen. And so, looking into the future, looking on the horizon, that's what I want to start doing, rather than paying interest on, bonds. If we can, put money aside to help pay for that, I think that's a really smart way to go. But, hearing stories of people getting taxed out, and I hear it on the regular, that's a reality. It's happening, and we need to be aware of that. So, the reason that I feel like I support a 6% levy increase is because I want to look ahead and plan ahead. I don't want to have to react to the feds taking away $750,000 every year from us. I want to be resilient to that and be able to operate within our county instead of relying on the outside organizations. So, yeah, I guess that's all. But thank you again for being here and expressing your concerns.
Okay, thank you. I'll just make a few comments, and maybe this will deal with some of the questions. As the commissioner, I'm only speaking for myself now, and I've been on the budget committee for 3 years, and budgeting is a very complex thing, and it's a very difficult thing. And as a commissioner, I think others do this too, we have to look at the big picture. And it's a matter of, we're not out to hurt people. We don't want to do that. We know that this is difficult for some people, and all we can do is encourage people that are having some financial difficulties to go to the state, with their refund policy for property taxes. If your income is low enough and your property taxes are high enough, I gotta get closer here.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm short and I gotta bend over and my neck gets sore. Okay, so, hang on. I'll start all over again. So we're not out to hurt anyone. We're not out to make things difficult. We're not trying to discourage people to move or have a tough life. But property taxes, we don't have a lot of control of because state statute. And so, it is tough. And I was mentioning that for those that have income difficulties, especially in regard to their property taxes, there is this fiscal disparities thing for property owners with the state. And you can apply and get refunds, so that's more of an equalizer. And that's one good thing about the state of Minnesota in that regard. We can't change the past, we can learn from it. We have to be accountable for the decisions made. We can't change them, we can't go back. But, I really want to assure all of you that we're here to listen. And I think this meeting has been very productive, it's been very constructive, and I really want to thank you for expressing your concerns and views and doing it in a way that is just something that we don't have to feel bad about. We hear you much better when it's just a good dialogue and persuasion rather than evasion. So thank you for that. It's really important. I would like to say that, when we look at revenue, we have a unique county. We have very high valuations of properties. We're fourth in the state for the median in property value. There's others on other suburbs or in the outer suburbs. The state, I would, take a look at the big picture, and you can go to Smart Assets on Google, and there's a property tax calculator, and you can plug in your assessed valuation and see what you would pay in any other county. And when you do that, you can see that, you're going to have we're going to be very low. It would maybe be second to the bottom when it comes to the tax rate. So go to Smart Assets. I'm not arguing with you by stating that. But I do acknowledge and know that when it comes to the dollar amount, which you see on your statements, and especially when assessed valuations go up, and those dollar amounts are higher because of that price. But that percentage is low. So that's sort of the standard. So we do, as commissioners, at least I do, say, are we out of line here with the rest of the state? And we learn from other counties as well. And we have discussions, especially with commissioners from the Northeast County. And we acknowledge we have very high median property values. And that comes to more dollars and cents. But we try to keep that rate low. So our rate is second lowest in the state the last time I calculated. But we do realize that that generates more dollars. And we're going through all these changes, which are going to change things. So that's just my summary. If you're interested, again, go look to Smart Assets and calculate it. So with that, I believe that we've made our comments. And Lloyd, what...
I've not brought it up at the beginning of that meeting since Kimber's here. I wonder if she couldn't give a little future outlook if the deficit of the hospital is going to keep going up. Because I know, like in my taxes, I pay $1,300 a year extra out. But we're just talking health taxes here, not this kind of use. And I think since she's here, she's usually pretty well prepared. I'd like to know that they call it their levy. Well, I call it a deficit.
Lloyd, could I ask you and Kimber if you guys could meet and talk about it?
I think it'd be good if the whole crowd could hear,
Let me,
If you want to make a comment, fine.
The board, our board meets on the second to the last Thursday of each month, and so that's an opportunity to come to that. We've also had in the past an update meeting, which I would be happy to go through with people. I have cards here, so if you'd like, my email address, my telephone number are here. Even my cell number is on here so that you can get a hold of me. And I would be happy to go through the process of the healthcare piece with people individually. I understand this is not the county issue, it's it's a little different. So, but I'm happy to go through that with people, and so.
Well, I'm not even interested in the process. I just wonder, because a lot of my people have asked me, is this going to continue to upgo? And if it does, is it ever will be a stop to it? Will it get as high as 2 million? Will it get as high as 3 million? Because, what's the future that you think? I know it's hard for you to tell, but when it went from 800,000 now up to 1.5 million, it's quite frightening. And I'm just wondering, what is the limit that your hospital or St. Luke's that's in charge will say, hey, this is it. We're going to have to shut her down. We can't keep operating in a deficit. That's all I'm trying to find.
I think that's the conversation that the board is interested in from people, because it comes down to the value proposition and the pieces that you're interested in and what you're interested in having services. Let's be blunt. We've always said the care center loses $1.5 million as a business line a year based upon the reimbursement. We don't get to choose what we charge. We're told what we charge by the state of Minnesota. The ambulance services loses $500,000 a year as a service line. Home health loses as a service line. So it becomes a value proposition about what people want to have as a service available to us. So, again, I'm happy to go through that with people.
Well, that's what I'm saying, a lot of rural hospitals have closed down, and I'm sure everybody in this community would hate to see the hospital ever close down. So what can the people of this community do? Evidently, it looks like it's a state trying to get a hold of your state representatives and congressmen then to try to see if they can't put in the money when you got a small populated area like this with only 5,180 people in it, that maybe they could try to help out, because the big part of this, maybe our county taxes ain't the worst thing in the world, but when you add on the school referendum tax, which I pony up $1,800 a year for that and $1,300 for the hospital. Well, if I didn't have to pay that, that's like 23% of my taxes. You know, that's a big difference. And then you can absorb a few hits by the county now and then, you know, if they're not $1,000 a year, et cetera. So I guess I'm sort of a little bit worried, you know, for the people that live here, because to have a good hospital, all of a sudden I don't want to see a bombshell drop and say your outfitter, you know, who's ever in charge of our hospital here, I don't know the whole status, finally says, hey, we can't go in a deficit anymore. This is it. So is there a red line somewhere that people of this community should be concerned about? Because what you must employ a rate of 100 people up there, you know? 150. Yeah, 150. So I mean, I think it's a big, serious, you know, it's something that really should have a lot of concern looked into, you know, and I mean, if I don't know if your bosses tell you, hey, you know, how far you can go in the red every year or not, I don't know. I'm just sort of curious if there is a limit set, and if there was, I think it would be nice if the public, the taxpayers of Cook County would know about it, because it is quite important to keep that hospital here, you know, and if there's any way that the citizens of the county can help by calling their representatives and say, hey, this is quite important, and I know you're not going to get no money out of IIRB to help or anything, but to me, when you're talking about 150 employees, if something did really go bad, that's a bad deal for the county. That would almost put it in the graveyard.
Yeah.
So again, no, there's not a limit. If you're saying, is there this number, there's not that particular number. Again, our board, we have an elected board. We meet on the second to the last Thursday of every month. They would be very, I'm sure, interested in having people participate. And again, I'm happy to go through this process with anybody. So if they would like to try to understand a little bit of healthcare reimbursement and healthcare expenses, I'm happy to go through that process. And yes, if you have the opportunity to talk to your congressional delegation, we are predominantly reimbursed by Medicare on the hospital side, Medicaid by the nursing home side. If you have that opportunity to talk to those elected officials, the reimbursement for particularly small rural facilities is not appropriate to keep us going. Just is not. And Senator Smith is here. We've talked about that. We'll continue to talk. Representative Sauber. We'll continue to go through that process. But the scary part, you're right. 118 hospitals have closed. Rural hospitals have closed since 2010.
That's what I'm scared of. Yeah.
It is a massive concern. The American Hospital Association is involved, Minnesota Hospital Association, and the National Health Association. We're involved in all of that, and I would be happy to go through that with people on
Okay.
hospital time.
Okay. No, you made some good points, Lloyd, and thank you, Kimber. And yeah, sometimes it gets down to, you know, do we want something and value it, and you know, that's that service delivery that we always have to decide on in regards to taxes, and it's a tough balance. It's sort of like an equation. But with that, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming tonight and expressing your concerns.
Come back.
Here, I got a hand.